It was a typical Tuesday night when I first noticed the problem backslash. I had just settled into bed after a long day at work, looking forward to a good night's sleep backslash. The clock struck midnight, and I closed my eyes, ready to drift off into a peaceful slumber backslash. But just as I began to relax, a deep, echoing bark shattered the silence of the night backslash. It was loud, relentless, and seemed to come from right outside my bedroom window backslash. At first, I thought it was just a one backslash off occurrence backslash. Perhaps the dog had seen a raccoon or a stray cat backslash. But as the minutes turned into hours, it became clear that this was no ordinary barking episode backslash. The dog, my neighbor's dog, was on a mission backslash. It barked with such fervor and intensity that it felt like it was announcing the end of the world backslash. I tossed and turned, trying to block out the noise, but it was futile backslash. The barking continued, echoing through the night, drowning out any hope of sleep backslash. As the hours dragged on, I found myself growing increasingly frustrated backslash. I had work the next day, and I needed my rest backslash. I glanced at the clock. 1 a.m., then 2 a.m., and still the barking persisted backslash. By the time the sun began to rise, I was a sleep backslash deprived mess, my mind foggy and my patience wearing thin backslash. The next day, I decided to confront my neighbor backslash. I approached him in the late afternoon, hoping he would understand the impact his dog's barking was having on my life backslash. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my tone friendly backslash. "Your dog has been barking all night, and I really need my sleep backslash. Could you bring him inside at night?" He looked at me with a smirk, as if my request was absurd backslash. "He's just doing his job," he replied dismissively backslash. I felt a surge of irritation, but tried to remain calm backslash. "I understand that, but it's really affecting my sleep backslash. Can you please do something about it?" He shrugged, clearly uninterested in my plight backslash. "Dogs bark backslash. It's what they do backslash." With that, he turned away, leaving me feeling frustrated and unheard backslash. I returned to my apartment, determined to find a solution backslash. That night, the barking returned with a vengeance backslash. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing backslash. I needed to take action backslash. I grabbed my phone and started recording the incessant barking backslash. I thought about how I could turn the tables on my neighbor backslash. If he wasn't going to take my concerns seriously, maybe I could give him a taste of his own medicine backslash. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise, I waited for my neighbor to return from his night shift backslash. I set up my speaker, pointed it toward his wall, and pressed play backslash. The sound of his dog barking filled the air, loud and clear backslash. I cranked up the volume, letting the echoes of the barking reverberate through the quiet morning backslash. I could hardly contain my satisfaction as I imagined my neighbor waking up to the sound of his own dog's chaos backslash. I played the recording for a solid 5 minutes before turning it off backslash. I felt a sense of triumph wash over me backslash. This was my way of reclaiming my peace backslash. The next day, I repeated the process backslash. Again, I waited for him to come home, and once more, I blasted the recording of his dog barking backslash. I could only imagine the confusion and annoyance he must have felt as he was greeted by the very sound that had kept me awake for nights on end backslash. After 2 mornings of this, I noticed a change backslash. On the third night, as I lay in bed, I heard something different backslash. The barking had stopped backslash. I peeked out my window and saw my neighbor's dog inside the house, lying peacefully on the floor backslash. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental backslash. The next morning, I decided to confront my neighbor again backslash. This time, I approached him with a smile backslash. "Hey, I notice your dog is inside at night now backslash. That's great backslash." I said, try and keep the conversation light backslash. He looked at me, a hint of confusion in his eyes backslash. "Yeah, I figured it was time to bring him in backslash. He was barking a lot, and I didn't want to disturb you anymore backslash." I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction backslash. I appreciate that backslash. It really makes a difference backslash. As the days turned into weeks, the barking became a distant memory backslash. I had successfully reclaimed my sleep, and my neighbor seemed to have learned a valuable lesson about being considerate backslash. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about confrontation or anger. It's about finding a clever way to make your point backslash. In this case, pressing play on a recording of his own dog had done the trick backslash. I had turned the tables without raising my voice or causing a scene backslash. Reflecting on the experience, I realized that it wasn't just about the barking dog. It was about communication and understanding backslash. I had learned that sometimes people don't realize the impact of their actions until they experience it themselves backslash. In the end, I found peace in my home, and my neighbor learned to be more mindful of his dog's nighttime antics backslash. It was a win backslash win situation, and I couldn't have been more pleased with the outcome backslash. As I settled into bed each night, I felt a sense of calm wash over me backslash. I had taken control of my environment and found a way to coexist peacefully with my neighbor backslash. And while I would always remember the barking dog that had once disrupted my sleep, I would also remember the clever way I had turned that situation around backslash. Sometimes, the best solutions come from unexpected places, and a little creativity can go a long way in resolving conflicts.